Good evening. You are tuning in to AWANI Tonight with me, Cynthia Ng. State of emergency will not be extended. Laws already revoked last week. And with little room for debate, can we expect any substantial outcome from the Dewan Rakyat special sitting? That's coming up. Prime Minister Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin said the government expects most states to move to the final phase of the National Recovery Plan earliest by October. He said this was based on the ongoing efforts towards recovery and the rate of the vaccination program.
He added that the government will continue carrying out risk assessments to measure readiness of states to move to the next phases of the NRP. The NRP announced on June 15 underlined 4 transition phases, with every phase of transition for each state would be assessed based on 3 key threshold indicators. This includes the average daily cases, bed occupancy at intensive care units, and percentage of fully vaccinated adult population.
Kerajaan sudah memutuskan di sidang khas Majlis Keselamatan Negara bagi negeri yang sudah berada di fasa kedua, ia tidak akan kembali ke fasa pertama. Begitu juga dengan negeri yang beralih ke fasa ketiga, tidak akan berpatah balik ke fasa kedua. Inilah kerana pendekatan PPN menekankan dengan izin exit strategy and no turning back.
So far, 6 states and 2 territories have moved into phase 2, namely Perlis, Perak, Pahang, Kelantan, Terengganu, Pulau Pinang, Sabah and Sarawak.
The government will not extend the state of emergency after it expires on August 1st. Speaking in the Dewan Rakyat today, de facto Law Minister Datuk Sri Taqiyuddin Hassan also said Putrajaya has decided to cancel all ordinances under the emergency proclamation. He revealed that the 6 ordinances drafted and enforced during the period were already revoked last Wednesday.
He said that the decision to revoke the laws was made effective after a joint cabinet meeting on the same date.
Kerajaan telah buat keputusan berdasarkan kepada perkara 1503 untuk membatalkan semua ordinan darurat yang telah dibuat semasa proklamasi darurat ini. Oleh kerana telah di-revoke, maka isu ungkai ataupun annulment sudah tidak lagi relevan.
The current emergency has been in effect since January 11th and is set to end on August 1st. Among regulations under the emergency ordinance include allowing compound of up to 10,000 ringgit for breaching MCO regulations and a fine up to 500,000 ringgit if found guilty of circulating fake news.
Taqiyuddin's announcement was criticised by many, with opposition leader Datuk Sri Anwar Ibrahim saying such a major policy decision should have been tabled and debated in Parliament.
Memaklumkan bukan dengan pengumuman begitu. Pengusi sedia maklum tentang proses Parlimen ini. Dia tak boleh buat umpamanya hari ini kita umumkan kita isytiharkan darurat. Dan datang sesi lagi, kita dah batalkan minggu lalu. Ini pasar malam ke? Tidak boleh. Saya nak lihat kertas pembentangan.
The announcement by Taqiyuddin came as a shock for the MPs since there were no prior announcements and there were legal implications to the revocations.
What can be expected for the rest of the special parliament session this week, the first sitting in more than 7 months? We asked political analyst Mujibu Abdul Muiz if the session will yield any substantial outcome on the COVID crisis and the economy when there's little room for debate.
According to political analyst Mujibu Abdul Muiz, although the emergency proclamation will not extend beyond August 1st, a general election is still out of question.
General election will be out of question in this condition simply because, the statistic is telling us that we are having so high cases of COVID infection as well as the death toll is still keep increasing. So I don't think the people also agree for any general election to be done although they believe that the solution for this political problem that happened in our country is general election.
Meanwhile, during the 5-day special sitting, Mujibu said he expects relevant members of parliament to answer questions pertaining the 7-month emergency period in handling COVID-19 and its impacts on the country.
What shall we expect is there any clarification that we need to hear from the government which is not received from their, this information are not explained throughout the daily briefing of the responsible minister, so on and so forth. So maybe in this 5-day session, the responsible minister will explain by the help of the members of parliament that maybe have some access to that particular information, and ask the responsible minister to explain and clarify to the people in the parliament special sitting.
We will be continuing our coverage on the first day of Parliament's special sitting on Consider This tonight. We are taking a closer look into the announcement that 6 emergency ordinances were revoked on July 21st without Parliament's knowledge. That's coming up after AWANI tonight. Hundreds of contract medical workers nationwide staged a walkout earlier today in an effort to push for reform of a system which they claim hinders their career progress and offers no job security. Police, meanwhile, have also opened investigations on those who joined the Hotel Doctor contract movement for violating COVID SOPs.
Dangwangi Police Chief Muhammad Zainal Abdullah said this is due to the fact that no one is allowed to gather or take part in any assembly during the movement control order. Meanwhile, former Health Minister Datuk Sri Zulkifli Ahmad in a tweet implored the ruling government to not take any disciplinary action against doctors who participated in today's strike, as they are exercising their democratic right in a civil way and as last resort. The Congress of Unions of Employees in the Public and Civil Service, QPACS, also echoed the same sentiment. The organization highlighted that the demonstration did not affect the operation of health services at their respective health facilities, as they urged the government to give a clear time frame to address the claims of contract doctors through the Ministry of Health. Earlier, the government has announced a 2-year extension for contract doctors, while Health Director General Tan Sri Dr. Nur Hisham Abdullah and Inspector General of Police Datuk Sri Akril Sani Abdullah Sani have warned doctors to not participate in the movement. At the stroke of 11 a.m. today, hundreds of contract doctors nationwide participated in a walkout in an effort to pressure the government to provide job security for tens of thousands of contract doctors.
Meanwhile, the government has agreed to extend the contracts of about 14,000 medical doctors, dentists and pharmacists for a period of 2 years. Finance Minister Datuk Sri Tengku Zafrul Tengku Abdul Aziz said this will cost the government 1.2 billion ringgit, involving 7,000 people per cohort. This is a follow-up to the government's decision for the group to be offered contractual appointments for a period of 2 years after completing the compulsory service period. He also said the Prime Minister had instructed the Health Ministry to draw up a comprehensive plan comprising immediate action, short, medium and long-term plans to enable the direction for the medical services to be drawn up. We will take a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. More than 10 million residents of Ho Chi Minh City will be placed under strict overnight curfew beginning today. The decision was made as the COVID-19 situation in the southern city continues to spiral.
Movements will be prohibited across Ho Chi Minh City between 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. starting today. All activities will also be suspended during the curfew except for emergency medical care. However, no end date was announced for the measure. Ho Chi Minh City has been under a lockdown since early July. Residents are allowed to leave home only for medical emergencies and food. Almost all public transport links with the city have already been suspended. Currently, more than a third of Vietnam's 100 million people are under a lockdown, including residents of capital Hanoi.
Indonesia has allowed certain socio-economic activities to resume today. President Joko Widodo said that while overall restrictions in place since July would be extended for a week, small shops, restaurants and some shopping malls are now allowed to reopen.
Small businesses, vehicle workshops and hair salons will be allowed to operate till 9 p.m. with strict observation of health protocols. The public is also allowed a 20-minute duration for dine-ins at roadside stalls and restaurants, while malls will be permitted to operate at a 25% capacity outside of designated higher-risk red zones. Jokowi said measures imposed in early July would continue until August 2nd as the Delta variant continues to drive up the number of cases.
Singapore is looking to allow quarantine-free travel for those who are fully vaccinated against COVID-19 from September. The government said it expects 80% of its population to be inoculated by then.
Finance Minister Lawrence Wong said that the Republic will establish travel corridors with countries or regions where COVID-19 is under control, and those who are vaccinated may not have to quarantine or may be allowed to self-isolate at home. The city-state is also set to review whether to loosen curbs in early August when 2/3 of its population would be fully vaccinated. Last week, the country tightened social curbs, including halting restaurant dining and banning gatherings of more than 2 people for 1 month after a spike in infections. Nearly 75% of its 5.7 million people have been vaccinated with at least 1 dose of the COVID-19 vaccine, while more than half the country has received both doses.
Authorities in eastern China are taking various precautionary measures against Typhoon Infa, which made its second landfall today. Millions of people in the Zhejiang, Jiangsu and Shanghai provinces have been transferred to safety as villages and cities were flooded following heavy downpour and strong winds.
China's National Observatory has renewed its orange or second highest alert for Typhoon Infa. The typhoon first landed late Sunday in Zhejiang province, where hundreds of thousands of people were evacuated. China's financial hub of Shanghai was also at virtual standstill as the typhoon makes landfall. Flights in and out of the city's 2 major airports were cancelled, while high-speed trains and some metro lines were suspended. China earlier issued an orange alert for Typhoon Infa, the 6th typhoon to hit China this year. Authorities took heavy precautions ahead of the storm after last week's historic flooding in central Henan province, where at least 63 people died.
Tunisia's president has sacked the prime minister and suspended parliament following violent protests nationwide yesterday. Anger over the government's handling of a massive surge in COVID cases has added to the general unrest over Tunisia's economic and social turmoil.
President Kais Saied announced he was taking over the government. His supporters erupted in celebration, but opponents in parliament immediately accused him of staging a coup. After the announcement, army units were deployed around the capital, while soldiers surrounded parliament and blocked its speaker from entering. On Sunday, thousands of people defied COVID restrictions to demonstrate against the Prime Minister, Hisham Mashishi, calling for the dissolution of parliament and early elections. Tunisia's economy has been struggling for years, and the country recently reimposed lockdowns. It is facing one of the worst COVID outbreaks in Africa.
That is all we have for you on AWANI tonight. Get the latest news updates on COVID-19 and COVID-19 vaccines from astroawani.com and Astro AWANI app. I'm Cynthia Ng. We'll see you again.
Hello and good evening. I'm Melissa Idris.
And I'm Sharad Kuttan.
Welcome to Consider This. This is the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. Day one of the special sitting of Parliament didn't disappoint those who have wanted the long silenced House to be a forum for lively debate instead of just a briefing session. Now, in response to criticism that Parliament would remain a mere briefing session if it wasn't allowed to debate and to vote on the emergency ordinances, the de facto law minister made the startling revelation that all 6 ordinances had been revoked just days earlier, thus making a vote on the matter moot, or so he claimed. Many questions were raised today, and to help us sift through them, we have Dr. Afif Fahardin. He is the Deputy Chairperson of the Information Bureau of Bersatu. He's also the State Assemblyman for Seberang Jaya in Penang. Afif, thank you so much for joining us today. Were you surprised by Dato' Sri Taqiyuddin Hassan's revelation, since there were no reports of this, nothing in writing to substantiate his claim?
I think I'm not that surprised with the announcement made by Dato' Taqiyuddin, because I think the government, especially the cabinet and the Prime Minister himself, have repeatedly mentioned that this proclamation of emergency, it comes with a time limit, which is on the 1st of August. And I think what the government have clearly mentioned a few times, that the cabinet has mentioned that, and the Prime Minister making sure that to give the assurance that this proclamation, if there is a need to call it off earlier, or even on the 1st of August, that will be fulfilled by the government. So
right, but
I think that was the process.
Right, but this is not a reference to whether the emergency is extended, but to the ordinances, which we know that even when the emergency ends in August, the provisions, the ordinances that were passed during this period would continue to be enforced for 6 months after the end of the emergency. And that's really what was being debated, or at least that was what members of Parliament were asking to be able to vote on, whether to annul those specific ordinances so they did not continue to be enforceable 6 months after the emergency ends.
I mean, that's what the opposition and some of the majority of the lawmakers especially have asked and also have requested openly and publicly before. So I think it's not an issue that the government has announced it. I mean, it's just a matter of that the government didn't tell the opposition via phone. This is that they announced it over during the parliament debate today. So I don't find it as an issue, because that's what everybody is, especially on the opposition side, is looking for this ordinance to be taken out, and especially on the proclamation of the emergency.
Right, but we also have reports to say that there are only one of 2 ways emergency ordinances can be revoked: either the Agong revokes it, or whether a gazette is published, or both houses of Parliament vote to annul it. And I'm just wondering whether the procedure seems to the procedure was done correctly to you. Are you satisfied with the procedure?
I think I'm not the best person to answer, because I'm not a member of the cabinet, but I assume this procedure has taken place. Even though it was announced that in the session just now that that this was discussed in the few previous cabinet meetings, and the decision has been made at the cabinet meetings. And in order for these things to be revoked, definitely you correctly have pointed it out that it has to be the Yang di-Pertuan Agong. I assume that has been seen to by the minister and also by the cabinet and the government with the Yang di-Pertuan Agong.
Yeah, so let's move on to other issues during the day. One was a call by the Prime Minister, as he gave his address, that everybody should work together. But he also left the chamber after making his speech, not taking or engaging with other lawmakers. Do you think that those optics of him leaving Parliament will hurt him or benefit him?
I think, like I said, last week I appeared on AWANI with Dr. Jari Abdul and Hisham bin Rais to talk about how this special parliament sitting should take place, and what is the mindset of the MPs that should go and enter the Dewan today. I totally agreed with Hisham bin Rais at that time that today most of the MPs should actually come out and be a statesman in the sense that addressing the issue, the pandemic, the issue of economy, the issue of livelihoods that we are facing today. And sad enough, as a spectator, looking at the way, it's a missed opportunity for the opposition. Because, as you know, the argument that the opposition gave is that the opposition should be the check and balance in this period of pandemic towards the government. And I think they have missed that opportunity when each time the minister, even the prime minister, wanted to address the issues and things, point of order has been being fleshed out multiple times. And I think it's just rude, disruptive and madness from the opposition today. Because to me, like I said earlier, this parliament should be used as a platform for both sides, either for the opposition and also for the government. For the government to explain and also for the opposition to actually ask difficult and tough questions.
But how did it help that the Prime Minister left the chamber? My question is, how did it help that the Prime Minister left the chamber?
So from my understanding, today the topic that has been presented by the Prime Minister, which is the Plan Pemulihan Negara or the recovery plan, is actually, even though it's chaired by the Prime Minister, but the coordinating minister for this particular Plan Pemulihan Negara is Tengku Zafrul. So Yang Berhormat Datuk Seri Tengku Zafrul, as not only as a finance minister, but he is also the coordinating minister for this particular recovery plan. So I think it is normal practice in certain in any parliamentary discussion, even at the state assembly level, where if you look at the standing order, all the ministers are answering questions on behalf of the Prime Minister or even of the Chief Minister. So I think this is not something of a big issue. I mean, probably the opposition were upset that they're unable to interrupt and also disrupt the Prime Minister answer in the evening. That's why they came out and said that those things.
Okay, I take your point, Afif, that the situation in the chamber was somewhat madness today. But I'm just wondering, based on the tone of what we saw on day one of this 5-day parliamentary sitting, is there likely to be bipartisanship going forward?
No, that's what I hope for.